to FilmEU Expert Talks. I'm delighted to open today's session. My name is Mariana Lazarova, and I'm a professor PhD and the head of Screen Arts Management Program in National Academy of Theatre and Film Arts, and I'm honored to be the moderator of today's event. I have here a small campus from Maritime Museum in Lisbon, and as you may probably know, Portugal is a country defined by discovery, a land of explorers, and they even have their very impressive monument called Monument to Discoveries. And there is a very massive stone map there, which is called Windrose or Rosa dos Ventos. It's paved into the ground, and it served as a giant compass for history. Why? Because it is a 50-meter wide narrative of how the world was mapped into existence by Portuguese mariners. So this is a very nice metaphor which visually synchronizes time, geography, and expansion of knowledge. Well, my campus is a lovely souvenir, you know, and there is a very curious thing that on its box there are words written in 3 different languages: Spanish, Italian, and French, making this product a true product of cultural exchange, just like the theme of today's event. European Union cultural policy realities, navigating Europe's culture compass. Though small and delicate, I can assure you that this compass is functional, and I believe it will help us find the right path through today's discussion. Well, Lisbon was the starting point for those who wanted to map the world. Today, we use our culture compass to map the future of European policy. To help us map this territory, we are joined by our keynote speaker, Mrs. Diana Andreeva Popiordanova, and I would like to introduce her in a bit more detail, as her expertise is truly remarkable. Dr. Diana Andreeva Popiordanova is director of the Observatory of Cultural Economics, an organization for independent research in cultural economics in Bulgaria. She is a lecturer in the University of National and World Economy, UNVE, Department Media and Public Communications, UNESCO Chair on Media and Information Literacy and Cultural Policies for Sustainable Development and National Academy of Theatre and Film Arts. She is co-editor of the Bulgarian Profile of Cultural Policy in the Compendium of Cultural Policies and director of the Center for Media Research, Audiovisual Policy and Cultural Industry Biljana Tomova in UNVE Sofia. Diana Andreeva is part of the research team of the International Horizon 2020 Creative Industries Cultural Economy Production Network project. She is a part of the focal point and representative of Sofia Creative City of Film of UNESCO. She was a member of the National Council of Cinema, and she is still a member of the European Network for Culture, and a project of the European Commission since January 2025. With our compass in hand, let us look at our first destination. Diana, how exactly does the Culture Compass redefine the strategic role of culture in the EU policy, especially when we compare it to the previous frameworks like the new European Agenda for Culture?
Thank you very much for the presentation. as well as the teaser with the compass, because the Portuguese people, they called themselves the first pioneer of globalization. So part of the cultural compass introduced by the European Commission in November 2025 have the idea of globalization, but also the idea of the new compass, the long-term strategy for the first time in European culture, is to look inside in the European Union, inside in the countries. But I'm, let's say, impressed by yesterday's news, and I can't hide it, because it was unexpected that Germany and the German foreign minister presented an idea of European Union on two speeds, let's say. At the first level, or on two levels. The first level will be France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Finland and Poland. So the biggest markets, the biggest producer of culture and creative industries, and also let's say the fundamental of the cultural compass in European Union, and the policies, instruments and etc. And also the finance that is coming from the biggest markets. I'm curious how the rest of the European Union countries, the member states, how we are going to adopt this cultural compass and implement it in the national cultural policy on the second speed or second level. Because, for instance, in the previous framework called the New Agenda for Culture 2018 and the working plan of European Commission introduced in every 4 years, Bulgaria wasn't able enough to implement the measures, wasn't able to implement the instruments and the policies that were forced by the Commission in this new agenda. So this is somehow a problematic issue from yesterday about the cultural compass and about the structural financing that is going to be along with the cultural compass. And we could say that for the first time this long-term strategy stressed not only to the economic growth of culture and creative industries, but the most important priority is cultural rights. It's connected by the Global Sustainable Goals by UNESCO and by the new report of cultural policy for sustainable development, because the Mondial, the main conference in every 4 years of UNESCO, stressed that the 18th goal after 2030 has to be culture. It was planned to be introduced as a standalone goal, sustainable goal for development in 2015, but we've been unable to develop it as a standalone goal in this period. So this is the main task for this cultural compass. That's why for the first time in European Union we have a long-term strategy for 10 years. And I'm curious if the Ministry of Culture, for instance, in Bulgaria, they've read it already and started to implement some measures, policies, especially for the film industry, because the audiovisual sector is also one of the priority of this new cultural compass. And also interesting thing for the cultural compass is that it's not just the paper like I have in my hand. Just written ideas, very beautiful text and so on. The cultural compass is going along with the financial framework, starting with the Creative Europe. I think most of the European citizens in every member state, they know exactly what is Creative Europe, but also we are going to use the two important funds that in the previous agenda for culture 2018 and the previous instruments we've been unable to use it. This is the cohesion and structural fund, especially the regional development funds and the social funds, European Social Fund. And those two funds are connected with the rest of priorities. regional development, because we call the European Union Union of Regions, but we forgot this, especially in the past 4 or 5 years, and especially after COVID, and 2-3 years after COVID, and some measures that we implemented. So one of the main priority, as I said, is the regional development, and the policies starting from bottom up, from local or super local level to national, through national to European and global level, and vice versa. And also one thing that is very important, and especially for countries like Bulgaria, this is the state of artists, and a special legislation about the artistic freedom, about the social protection of artists. This is very important, especially for independent artists, especially for the people from the film industry, for instance, because they're connected to projects with the time limitation, for instance, 2, 3, 4 years, and then they're unemployed. So European Union and European Commission, through this strategy, started to think, especially after COVID, that the social rights has to be a basic instrument in this cultural compass. That's why the second instrument with several billions of euro is the European Social Fund. And the most interesting instrument for me is called Agora. This is the instrument about social rights, civil society as well. It's connected also with the CERF, a new instrument called Citizens, Equality, Rights and Values. Because we are talking about the cultural rights, this is a fundamental right along with the Lisbon strategy that we implemented, and this is the basic of European Union. And we are not talking anymore about the democratic values, which are also the fundamental base in this cultural compass priorities.
My brief comment about this idea of 2 speeds is that a compass can always be an icebreaker, don't you think? And as far as I understand, the previous framework, these new European agendas from 2018, focused primarily on how culture supports social cohesion and economy. However, the world has changed, you mentioned it. We faced a pandemic, a rapid digitalization, and various global crises. Sometimes I even think that we live in a broken world, by the way. The Culture Compass is not just another document. Obviously, it's a new way of navigating culture. It views culture not merely as a sector, but as a strategic tool to address major challenges, from climate change and democracy to new technologies. So, moving from the strategic role to the core values you mentioned, please, Diana, tell us what should be the guiding principles of the Culture Compass behind the framework. And please comment some very important issues like artistic freedom, cultural rights, sustainability, social justice, and how should they be balanced in practice.
I will start with an example of Bulgaria about the cultural rights. For me, this is the most important priority on the level of Cultural Compass, and not only the level of Bulgaria, for instance, a mid-sized country. We are not small, like we think that we are small, but we are a mid-sized country in European Union. But this is the fundamental right for the European citizens, and the most important policy. As you said, the economic growth was the main priority for the European Union for decades. Started from ex-Britain Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. In the 70s, she started to calculate the economical impact of culture and creative industries, and then it was introduced into the cultural policy on the European level. So, as a member of European Union in 2005, we started also to calculate the economical impact, culture and creative industries and employment, turnover, foreign investments and so on. And we forgot about the citizens. That's why the example of Bulgaria that I could give is that our attendance to the cultural activities or cultural rights for the population of Bulgaria, approximately on the average level, 60% of the population, they're not using their cultural rights on a different factors, economic, demographic factors. They don't have an access on the regional level or local level or super-local level. So this is the fundamental problem, as I said, not only for Bulgaria, for the various European countries and member states. And that's why in the working plan, for instance, the previous document before the Compass, cultural rights, they were introduced after COVID because we saw that not only the physical access to culture is a problematic issue, but also digital access. And the inequality that we have, this is the precise point in this cultural compass, digital inequality, and especially for this part of the population and the age group 65 plus. So this is the main problem. That's why the compass is a horizontal to connect it also to Digital Europe strategy. This is also a horizontal policy that European Union introduced recently, and also with the funding, also with the financial framework, how to bring back this access to culture without digital inequality and with the physical access as well. About the artistic freedom, sometimes this is also a problematic issue, and not only the social security issues for the artists, both of them, they are going together hand with hand. So about the artistic freedom, in some societies, like for instance in Hungary, the cultural policy is stressed with the patriotic cultural policy issues, for instance. We have censorship not only on the artistic way, for instance in some countries, but we have also censorship about the economic reasons. When you have a project and certain funding, this is also an auto-censorship. So also in European Union we have a main problem for the whole countries, especially for the eastern flank, let's say, and this is the issue of media literacy and cultural literacy, and also about the disinformation. This is also cultural rights and artistic freedom and security issues. That's why, starting from the level of UNESCO through the Compass, because the Cultural Compass and the Mondial Cult Report for Cultural Policy and Sustainable Developments, they are connected, very strong. One of the recommendations of the Compass and the Mondial Cult document of UNESCO is that cultural policy is going together with the strategy for security and defense. That's why on the global level we are building observatory of peace and security in the cultural field. So this is a very important issues that the Cultural Compass is tackling for the recent geostrategical, let's say, issues that every day we are amazed from how to say one of the biggest countries in the world, like United States or China or Russia. I think that European Union has to bring back the common documents, the common strategies, and to put it inside in the countries, not outside of our countries, let's say. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe I have to summarize that it's curious that the compass shifts for sure the focus from the culture as an abstract value to the artist as a working professional. And it is clear that the culture compass is not just a simple list of rules. It's a new strategic framework of the EU, and its goal is to bring the artists to the forefront by emphasizing the importance of their social status and fair pay. It focuses on sustainable funding, artistic freedom, you mentioned it, protection from censorship, and the challenges of digital rights and AI. Let's not forget the rapid invasion of AI. Well, the Compass promises to make Europe the best place to be an artist. What concrete policy and funding measures would be required in our country, for example, for this sentence to become true rather than rhetorical? And how can the Culture Compass effectively address precarious working conditions and social protection gaps for artists and cultural workers beyond project-based funding?
I mentioned the new legislation about the artistic conditions or the status of artist. For instance, in Bulgaria we are introducing this legislation on 25th of February on the Forum for Sustainable Development of Performing Art. This is a common project, let's say, with NATFA and University of National and World Economy, the National Music Academy, Union of Bulgarian Artists, the National Association of Musicians, and the International Festival of Performing Arts in Varna. So Varna Summer. So for the first time in Bulgaria we are introducing the new artistic social conditions from the university until the pensions and when the person is retirement. Because we saw for many years that this gap or gaps basically in the social law press the artistic freedom, artistic conditions and social securities as well. We are trying to introduce the differentiated legislation for the tax system and tax incomes of artistic society, let's say, as a common group. So another measure that we can use also by external funding is the cohesion funds for this measure, especially for Bulgaria. And we are trying with this legislation of the status of artist just to fulfill the gap that we have in the legislation as a whole. Mm-hmm.
I'm very glad that universities in Bulgaria have contribution to this legal improvement, to the improvement of legislation. But anyway, another vital aspect of the Culture Compass is that it addresses some inequalities through cultural decentralization. It aims to move resources from center to peripheries and ensures that digital transformation becomes a bridge, not a barrier, for rural communities and minorities. So, Diana, in what ways can the Compass help reduce territorial, social and digital inequalities in access to culture across Europe? Please comment this issue in the light of opposition: urban, rural, central, periphery, majority, minority.
Going back to the cultural rights, for instance, what we faced in the access to culture in Bulgaria, for instance, is that we have cultural access in Sofia, in Plovdiv, Varna, Burgas, some other from the biggest cities and towns, but the rest of the country is like a cultural desert. And it's not only in Bulgaria, I could say. That's why we took the example, for instance, from the mobile cinema as a big track from Great Britain, from France. They have the same problems, even though they are one of the biggest European markets, especially in the field of film industry, for instance. But what the European Union introduced by the Cultural Compass is to think about the regions, to think about these areas, rural areas, where we have still European citizens. And according to Bulgarian constitution, for instance, and also to Lisbon Treaty, every single European citizens or Bulgarian citizens, we have an equal right to access to culture. And we cannot fulfill it through the national cultural policy. We cannot fulfill this statement in the Lisbon Treaty, for instance, or the contract for European Union, the Treaty for European Union, with the European cultural policy. And also this is not obligatory, this cultural compass, let's say. We can introduce some measures in Bulgaria, or we couldn't, for instance, have enough budget financing, so on. That's why, as I gave an example, we are trying to press the Ministry of Culture, for instance, from bottom up with this Forum for Sustainable Development, introducing, for instance, the legislation for artistic freedom and status of artists. But according to this example, using this new, for instance, financial instruments, Agora, as I presented, this is organized for the civil societies, civil communities in the rural areas, in the non-urban areas as well. I also would like to give an example with the strategy of Sofia, the cultural strategy of Sofia. The main issue and the main strategical priority is center periphery, because 80% of the cultural activities, for instance, are concentrated in Sofia, but in the very center of Sofia. When we're going to the metropolitan area and along the villages of Sofia, you cannot see the cultural activities. That's why the Cultural Compass introduced this requirement to the member states to think about the rural areas, how to build an infrastructure, how to change the model of financing at all for the cultural organization, because it's project-based. This is one of the problems of artistic unemployment and insecurity, precarity as well. The Agora, for instance, and the SURF, this program also connected to the civil society. They introduced the structural financing of cultural organization. This is the multi-year financial framework for an independent organization, and it is very important not only for the biggest cities and towns in European Union, like Sofia or Plovdiv, but most important for the rest of the country. Because yes, we have, for instance, an instrument, National Fund Culture, within the Ministry of Culture, and a cultural organization from a rural area could apply for a project, but this is just for several months or a year. And the European Commission decided to have these instruments, financial instruments, for the multi-year financing and structural financing, also institutional grants for the cultural organizations, because of the security of these rural areas, non-urban areas, cultural organizations. And I think also this is connected also with the labor conditions, because for most of the people, Sofia, for instance, in our country is the place that you can work within the cultural field. But outside of Sofia, it's very difficult. So we have like concentrated points in European Union with the cultural activities, but the periphery, the rest of the countries, for instance, except the capitals and the biggest cities, they are more or less cultural deserts.
I'm sorry to hear that. But from a management perspective, the Culture Compass represents a shift towards smart cultural planning, I think. It is no longer just about providing funds. It is about fostering participatory governance and building modern infrastructure, as you mentioned it. This new model offers cities and regions great opportunities to grow, but also implies serious responsibilities, especially regarding sustainability and social accountability. So, what opportunities does the Culture Compass create for cities and regions? That is, cultural strategies, participatory governance, cultural infrastructure, and what new responsibilities does it imply for them? Can you just outline the frame?
I mentioned already some programs about the citizens and especially the access for culture, how to include minorities, like we have a Roma community, a Turkish community, Armenian community, and so on, how to include it in the cultural policy. Because on a national level, if you see the example of Bulgaria, we are not connecting these minorities in Bulgarian cultural policy. We're not funding the policies, instruments, we don't have it on a national level. But the compass implies that every member state has to think about the civil society, and civil society is an important part of this new way of thinking, not culture as a standing pillar somewhere, but as a horizontal policy, and especially going down to the municipalities, to the local communities, to every citizen of Bulgaria and European Union. So the European Union also is using this cultural compass to stress this horizontal way of thinking, and especially connection with the education, for instance, with the regional development, with the social cohesion, and so on and so on. So for the regional development and for the social impact of the cultural compass, on a level of the member states, we have to build a new, let's say, a strategy, or we can use in every member state we have now, along with the global sustainable development goals, a strategy for sustainable development. In Bulgaria, our strategy is called Bulgaria 2030. Not so many people know this fact. Not so many people of Bulgaria, for instance, they've read this strategy. They know that the priority 13, for instance, is about culture, tourism, and cultural heritage. One thing that we can use it, and it's very, we can organize it very easily from bottom up, not from the ministry to the civil society, is to present the measures that are implemented also in the cultural compass, that are introduced in the cultural report for sustainable development of UNESCO. It's already written, let's say, so we can have these measures in this strategy, Bulgaria 2030, for instance. And it's very easy way of organizing also financial framework, because the responsible organization and institution for this strategy, Bulgaria 2030, for instance, is the Ministry of Finance. And as I said, every member state have this strategy for sustainable development, and it's one of the easiest way how to build this new way of cultural policy on horizontal level, because these strategies for sustainable development, they're built on the global sustainable goals on horizontal level, connected with the digital economy, connected with the education, regional development, tourism, as I mentioned, a very important sector, for instance, for Bulgaria. And this is very easily we can organize it, as I said.
Well, it seems that the Culture Compass is not longer funding just funding culture, but funding smart culture. And the local communities must learn how to manage those processes together, which actually represents a challenge. And since we're talking about resources and management and planning, we must look at the financial reality. So we all love the vision, but let's talk about the price tag. How cultural organizations and networks use the Culture Compass as an advocacy tool in national budget debates and in negotiations on the next European Union multi-annual financial framework.
The Compass introducing also something, they call it a cultural data hub. So we are all forced, institutions and organizations, universities as well. FilmEU community, for instance, could be part of this cultural data hub, organizing the data, for instance, about the film industry, about the artists and professionals, technicians in the film industry, and provide the evidence-based cultural policy. This is the main task for this cultural data hub, along with the new cultural statistic framework by UNESCO that was introduced in October. And I could mention some new moments and new data that is organized in this cultural statistical framework of UNESCO, because they're very important. Going together with the Cultural Compass, they're introducing here in the Cultural Data Hub, these are the festivals, because we've been, the festivals, they've been outside of any measurement within the national statistical institutes in European Union, on Eurostat level as well. And this is one of the very fast developing part of not only Bulgarian culture but European culture, for instance, and especially music festivals, film festivals. So we are going to measure also the cultural tourism for the first time, together with the new framework of UNESCO. And also we are not talking anymore about the cultural activities or arts, but we are talking about ecosystems. So the how to say, the pinpoint of this cultural statistical framework is the ecosystem statistical framework of cultural activities and in certain arts. Not just an organization, but the whole ecosystem has to be measured. So this is the new moment in the cultural statistical framework. And as I said, the Cultural Compass would like to see from every member state evidence-based cultural policy, not just like, yeah, this idea is very good, we can implement it. Not anymore. Because when you're working on a horizontal level, for instance, you will need certain frameworks, statistical frameworks and proofs that one policy has to be introduced and implemented, especially in education, regional development, that the culture has to go in, for instance, in the European Social Fund, and in particular, as an example, in Bulgarian Social Fund and Structural Fund. So this is one of the most important tool for the advocacy of European citizens. And on the level of cultural rights, yes, we are forced, let's say, it's not a polite just text and pages. We are forced to fulfill this with evidence-based indicators that prove that every citizen in European Union has an access to culture according to age, demographic factors and so on, income especially, because it's very important, especially for Bulgaria, Romania, and the rest of the Eastern European countries. The income is a factor that could not give an equal access to culture and cultural activities. So through this data hub, for instance, we can provide as a member state not only Ministry of Culture, as I said, but also the institutions, organizations, different data. And I can give an example because for the third consecutive years, We are doing the Observatory of Cultural Economics together with the Ideas Factory and Association for Development of Sofia, national representative sociological research. And 10 days ago, we said that, okay, we are going to send a letter to the European Commissioner, Glenn Mikalev, who introduced the compass in the autumn, because we would like to see the cultural passports introduced in Bulgaria. And obviously for 3 years, we cannot see any changes in the cultural participation in Bulgaria, for instance. We have like 60% of the population do not attend cultural activities. That's why we decided to go on an upper level and introduce the cultural passports for all of the age group 6 to 26 on European level and also on particular Bulgarian level. Because for example, the younger generation and the most popular generation in Bulgaria now Gen Z, for instance, they're not interested in film industry, in Bulgarian movies, and it's like a lack of habits we could see. This is the most important factor. That's why we wanted to ask the Commissioner not just to knock on the door of Bulgarian Ministry of Culture, but to have a conversation about the cultural rights in Brussels and then in each member state. And then we would like to see these cultural passports for the age group of 6 to 26, covering the children, pupils, students, and etc., youngsters, introduced in each member state. In some countries, we have so-called vouchers or passports, but this is for the limitation of the age group, like up 18 or for the only for children. We would like to see the whole age group, because this is also part of the fight with disinformation. This is also a cultural literacy, media literacy. So we would like to see it as a tool. That's why I wanted to give this as an example of what we can do through this cultural compass as a citizens.
Well, I mean, the representative of Gen Z generation are citizens of the world. That's what makes their attitude so impressive and charming, maybe. But you said something very interesting. In short, what gets measured gets managed. So the compass is a powerful advocacy tool because it transforms culture from a cost into a strategic management, and it gives us the language, it gives us the voice to negotiate and to fight for a central place in the next European budget. As we know, even the best idea can fail if the implementation is poor. So we don't want these good ideas to become paper tigers. And let us bring our discussion towards some more concrete actions provided by the compass. Which are of the announced actions, such as the State of Culture report, the data hub you mentioned, or the artist charter, could have the strongest impact in your context? And what are the main risks of weak implementation regarding bureaucracy, lack of funding, or fragmentation?
As I said, this is also an important about the multi-annual financing, and it's also connected with the EU budget. So we have a huge campaign across European member states about the budget for culture on European Union level, and it was a huge campaign, as I said. But yes, we have these implementation risks, and I could start also with an example of Bulgaria. We are now without the president, without government, without the national budget for the 2026. And we are surrounded by a geopolitical, geostrategical crisis everywhere, and also war near us. The first risk I could observe is the political risk that we have. The second risk is lack of knowledge of Bulgarian politicians, that they cannot understand the importance of culture and cultural policy. They cannot see the effects of cultural rights, for instance, or artistic freedom. They cannot fulfill this lack of policies. For instance, in Bulgaria, we don't have a well-developed policy for access to culture or rights to culture, guarantee the cultural rights of Bulgarian population. Secondly, we have these bureaucracy risks that we could face also on the level of Ministry of Culture, at the level of Parliament, because we have an election very soon, in 2 months and a half, for instance, and this is also lack of political will, especially in the period of these elections, to have a conversation about culture and about cultural policy. That's why in March I could stress also that we are organizing a pre-election debate on the level of non-governmental organizations, because we cannot connect academic organizations and universities to the pre-election debates. But the Cultural Compass will be also one of the main points of discussion, because we have this risk of implementation on the level of politicians and political parties, the level of parliament, and also the special legislation. Because in Bulgaria, especially in the field of culture, we can observe so many examples of lobbying, especially in the film industry legislation, especially the Act for the Intellectual Property that you're professor in this field, and this in the cultural heritage legislation. So we have several risks, and also financial risks, because we are without budget, the national budget. We are repeating the data and the financial framework from 2025. As a member of the newest member of the Eurozone, we have some challenges that we are facing now with the specula and working conditions, working payments, and so on. I think these are the main risks that we have for the first part of the year. But then in long-term or short-term, mid-term level of cultural policy, the lack of national strategies, obviously, a strategical risk for the implementation of Cultural Compass, because we can introduce this part for culture in the program for Bulgaria 2030 in this field of in this part of cultural tourism and cultural heritage. But yes, we need political will, as I said, and also risk for the independent sector, I could see, because we are connected with this plan for resilience, for instance, that is 100% unpredictable according to the financial issue. Our colleagues from the non-government sector, for instance, they are blocked at the moment with the financial issues in the National Culture Fund. So it's a risk for the independent sector at all. That's why we introduced this legislation for the artist, the independent artist as well, because they're the most important in this way of experimental art and so on, the new way of art and cultural organization production in cultural products. But yes, we have huge insecurity in this field.
Well, Diana, but let's move back to the measurement of success. You have already mentioned that traditional economic data is not enough. And how should indicators for monitoring the culture campus be designed so that they capture not only the economic output, but also artistic freedom, diversity, and well-being?
I can divide the new indicators that we can introduce along with the cultural compass implementation in every member states in several groups. And the first one is artistic freedom and autonomy. So we can measure, for instance, in 3 ways with 3 indicators or groups of indicators: the percentage of artists with contractual security, and especially the long-term security. Because as I mentioned, we have this short-term project-based work in the cultural field, but it's we cannot work anymore in the European Union in this way, in a security way for the artists. And then the introduction of freedom of expression index. This is also an important tool for the legal protection, for the censorship incidents. I already gave some examples that we have, and also censorship is in economic way. We are depending from the financial source in this way. That's why it's economic censorship. And also the diversity of different artistic form from different age groups, also as a cultural product, I could say. Also an indicator we can introduce about the cultural rights, the percent of the population, as I mentioned already several times, the percentage of population accessing the cultural activities, participating in non-professional cultural activities as well. Because I will also, I could give an example from this field in Bulgaria. 90 to 93% of the population, we Bulgarians, we are not participating in non-professional arts. Neither music, neither drawing or dancing or some other cultural activities. On the contrary, I can give an example with Finland. 95% of the population is connected with the non-professional arts activities, dancing, music, and so on.
How do you explain that? Is it a national mentality or just
I think it's a lack of habits, and because of the lack of cultural policy in the past, sustainable cultural policy, the population, according, for instance, also to the index of happiness, we are so unhappy. We are in this part of the world called the most, the richest societies, let's say. We are part of the Eurozone. We are member of European Union.
And still unhappy.
And this is a habit that we have. This is the national mentality also that we cannot measure so easily. And I can give an example with different countries. For instance, from Africa or Latin America, they don't have houses, they don't have water even. And they're happier than us, no? This is a crucial point in our mentality, and also lack of policy. That's why we would like to introduce, as I mentioned, these cultural passports, because we have to start with cultural activities from the age of 5, 6 years, even earlier. And I can continue with indicators about the participation. Also on digital inequality that I mentioned about the cultural participation, it has to be also introduced an index of digital participation, because this is the new reality, especially after COVID. That's why European Union introduces this policy along the cultural compass, because we faced during the COVID the new audience coming in the digital digital environment, yes. And also a group of indicators we can introduce about the well-being and social impact. This is very important connections about the cultural field, for instance, cultural activities and happiness that we mentioned, but well-being at all, like the Scandinavian example that we have for many decades, for instance, and also health issues, culture and health. This is the newest researches that we have in the European Union. This is the group of indicators that we can introduce as well. And also the fourth group of indicators is about the diversity and pluralism. Percentage of public funding, for instance, going to minority or independent artists as a percentage, because I mentioned that, for instance, in Bulgaria, we don't have enough programs, policies, instruments for our minorities, and also a geographic diversity, and also regional diversity as a percentage, because for many decades ahead, we have to deconcentrating the cultural policy of Bulgaria, for instance, from Sofia to the rest of the country, and not only deconcentrated, but decentralizing as well, because we have, as I mentioned, 80% of concentration in the capital of Sofia. So with these measurements and indexes that we can introduce in our policy on European level, we can measure easily. And yes, this is also something that the FilmEU community could organize to measure within this consortium the activities, the cultural industries, the cultural participation, because this consortium of European universities are going beyond their main task, film industry, getting more and more important actors in the field of cultural policy.
Well, yes, in brief, it's high time for us to cease counting the sale of tickets, so to say, and to focus on human impact on culture. And in 2026, the success of a cultural policy is measured by the quality of life and by democratic values, not just by profit. And so, to conclude our discussion, let us look at the big picture, and I would ask you to analyze the global landscape. Do we face a risk of policy fatigue, too many agendas running in parallel? So my question is, how can the Culture Compass be meaningfully connected with other international networks, for example, UNESCO 2005 Convention, so that cultural policy remains coherent rather than overburdened by parallel agendas?
As I mentioned, this Cultural Compass strategy is connected with the Mondiacu document that was introduced in October, the new cultural report for sustainable development of UNESCO, and the global sustainable development goals. It's connected with the titles of UNESCO as well. So in Bulgaria we have many titles, and recently 2 centers of UNESCO on the level 2 of UNESCO centers. And it's also connected with the convention, the UNESCO Convention of 2005 on protection and promotion of diversity of cultural expressions. It's very interesting in geopolitical and geostrategical way of thinking, and the observation that I could stress is also the United States. They left UNESCO. They recently introduced, and especially Donald Trump introduced, the Board of Peace, that surprisingly Bulgaria joins this analog of United Nations so-called organization. It's unpredictable what will be exactly. But I could stress that, for instance, United States, they didn't sign the Convention of Cultural Protection and Promotion of Cultural Expression in 2005, because we are fighting, I mean the European community and member states, we are fighting with the global soft power of United States through film industry, through English language, for instance. So, and also this was an expected withdrawing from the UNESCO Organization of United States. So on this level, it will be very challenging for us because we are expecting China and Russia to replace United States in UNESCO through financial support. Because UNESCO, for instance, has a budget that now we have this lack of financing because of the United States. And that, I could say, from 2015 to 2025. So it will be a tough period for us. And also for the, not for the Chinese people or Russian people, for instance, but for the European people. Because we have to tackle with these geopolitical and geostrategical issues also within the cultural policy. And that's why I wanted to give this example with the United States and this Convention of Cultural Expression, and also with UNESCO, because UNESCO more or less is the biggest organization of United Nations. And I cannot see any geopolitical or geostrategical reason why we are not going to fulfill the each sign of Minister of Culture, 196 or 7 member states signing this document of Mondiakult, and this is going along, as I said, with the cultural compass in European Union. So along this, with this implementation of both documents and the statistical framework, as I mentioned before, this will be a huge challenge for the European member states as well. So what we are trying to implement from the Mondiakult and UNESCO is the artistic freedom and the legislation for artists introduced back in the history of 1980 first Mondiakult meeting. So until now, nothing in practice about this legislation and about this law for the protection of artistic labor and artistic organizations. And as I mentioned, we are forced with this cultural compass to fulfill the global sustainable development goals, because the common task for the 2030th is culture to be the 18th sustainable goals, standing alone, not within these 17 sustainable development goals.
Well, challenges everywhere, and maybe we have to adapt to new realities and to the new world order coming. Well, Diana, thank you so much. That is the end of our discussion. And I would also like to thank to the whole FilmEU team, which organized the whole event. And to wrap up, I would like to use again the same metaphor, because a compass is only helpful when there is a skillful navigator to hold it. And today, with your help, we understood how to navigate the very complex waters of European cultural policy. So thank you so much. And it is clear that the compass, the culture compass, is more than just a document. It's a strategy, it's a roadmap, in fact, and it's a roadmap for our future. And let us not forget that a compass doesn't just show where we are. It challenges us to decide where we have the courage to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much as well.